We have the legend Vasily Ivanchuk on our screens. He's 55 years old, but he is still a force to be reckoned with. A World Blitz champion in 2007, World Rapid champion in 2016, and he's facing one of the best players on the planet, Fabiano Caruana. Widely known as the second best player in the world after Magnus Carlsen, Fabiano is an amazing star here. And Vasily Ivanchuk's longevity is simply phenomenal. He was world number 2 back in the 1990s and also world number 2 in 2007. So he's just been there at the top for a very long time. This promises to be an amazing clash of generations. A shake of hands and off we go. E4, C5, we have the Sicilian and the Rosolimo has been played. Fabiano quickly castles, bishop breaks the pin, rook comes into the center, the bishop is questioned and Fabiano pulls it back to its initial square. Bishop g4, pinning the knight here and trying to fight for the d4 square. Asks the question to the bishop, he takes it, queen takes f3. Now white has the bishop pair. But it's not important what goes outside the board, but what remains on the board. Black wants to quickly develop and castle c3 with the idea of eventual d4. And Ivanchuk now goes bishop h6, a slightly weird move, trying to play against the d pawn. If you push it forward, I will trade one of the bishops and the bishop pair advantage will be lost there. And so that's the reason why right now Fabiano thinks for a bit, plays knight to a3 and wants to bring his knight to c2 and then push d4 on the board. Let's see what Ivanchuk plays here. He brings his knight out to f6. And now the knight goes to c2, defending the d4 square, preparing the pawn pushing forward. And Vasily quickly castles it out. And now pawn comes up to d4. He chops off the bishop, rook takes c1. The times on the clock, roughly around even. Both players have used around 20 seconds on the clock. And now Ivanchuk has to decide how is he going to play against these two white central pawns. Because white can push d5 at some point, e5 at some point. He takes, pawn takes. And now his idea is e6 and d5, I believe. That should be what he wants to do here. He plays e6. He could have also gone d5 directly, but he goes e6. And now Caruana needs to decide. Does he want to go d5 directly? No, he just plays his rook to the center of the board. White's position is a picture of harmony here. But black now... Ooh, Ivanchuk wants to bring his rook to c8. He's slightly hesitating there. I wonder what he's thinking. Yeah, he plays rook c8. Now putting pressure here. The knight comes to the e3 square and d5 is pushed. So black has equalized out of the opening. And a very important point here is that after e5, you have the knight sitting in on this beautiful central square. It's the reason why d5 works. Fabiano pushes it. And now knight e4 is logical because if you go back, it would be a bit passive. Knight e4, you could be afraid of bishop d3, but then maybe d4 is hanging. He actually goes knight d7. This is not a good move because now look at this. White's knight is looking at these weakened squares. Ivanchuk trying to be a little bit too precise there. Goes knight d7 and now queen g5, putting a queen on the active square. What does Caruana do next? He wants to play knight f6 check, but then simply takes. He plays queen g3, setting up a deadly trap. For example, if you go something like rook d8, I have knight f6 check and I pick up the queen here. So you have to be careful about knight f6 check. And Ivanchuk plays king h8. See, one of the things if you look at Ivanchuk closely is that before making his moves, he's slightly hesitating. Now queen e7, played without any hesitation quickly. White has the space, but black's pieces are pretty okay. The king also looks fine. It will be interesting to see how Fabiano builds up an attack. One way is, of course, to put the bishop on d3, knight on h2, knight on f3, keep the knight that it can jump here on g5, and he goes a3. Maybe just fighting for the b4 square here so that no piece can enter. And maybe it's time for black to break in the center with f6, when he would get very good play here. For example, take, and then the knight is eventually coming back to e4 if not taken. Ivanchuk has 1 minute, roughly around a minute on the clock, and he has to decide between pushing f6, maybe even f5, or maybe moving the knight from c6. He pushes knight a5, bishop comes quickly to d3. Caruana was ready with his move. I believe the point here is that the knight on c4 looks good, but the knight on c6 was more pesky. It was actually putting pressure on d4. The knight on c4 is not doing much. It is just looking active. Let's see what Ivanchuk does next, because white has managed to get his bishop to a beautiful diagonal. Maybe later h5 is coming up. And you can see the pressure is mounting for Ivanchuk because he's down to 35 seconds. And this h5 is a bad move because this is going to become a hook later. I love knight h2 move by Caruana because he's rerouting his knight to f3. If you look at it closely, the way in which Caruana is maneuvering his pieces is simply top notch. Now where does this rook go? He wants to play the rook and he plays it to d8, but now queen f4 with the idea of g4 is going to be super strong. Queen f4, knight g5, g4, he plays queen f4. And that's the reason why Caruana is considered one of the best players in the world. g4 played, putting even more pressure on Ivanchuk's position. After takes, I'm going to play queen takes. And now h5 is coming up. The bishop is looking here. The knight is jumping in. The king can move away and the rook can join in. Ivanchuk now down to his 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, he's lost on time there. Oh my goodness. And look at that. He says good game to his opponent, even though he lost on time, and which is the right assessment actually of the game. Caruana indeed played a good game, and Ivanchuk did not like the move e6 in the opening perhaps. Caruana was like knight a5 was not the best move perhaps. But Fabi, what a nice game that was by him. A lot to learn from the way in which calmly he gained space. But Ivanchuk should have put his knight into the center of the board. He arranges all his pieces. Ivanchuk had left, so Caruana also sets in Ivanchuk's pieces. One thing is for sure, Ivanchuk would love to play faster, but he's just unable to take his decisions at the speed at which he would like to.